Mele Kalikimaka. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm not entirely sure, but because I actually have a friend that lived in Hawaii for a while, and she is always correcting any pronunciations that I might have that are Hawaiian words, even like the word Hawaii. I guess it's pronounced differently in the Hawaiian language, but at any rate, Mele Kalikimaka. So a little bit of background. I had to Google to find stuff because throughout over 35 years of teaching, I don't recall anybody ever asking about this song. So it's a little surprising. I usually don't even think of it when I think of Christmas songs, but it's a fun song. So it was written by Robert Alexander Anderson, and usually it's just R. Alexander Anderson in 1949. And apparently he worked at a place, and a secretary asked him, because he was a songwriter a bit, asked him, so why aren't there any Hawaiian Christmas songs? And he thought about it and was like, you know, I don't know. So he wrote one. And that's a lot of times sort of what spurs me to write a song is I'm like, you know, there's no song about blah, blah, blah. So then I write one. But anyway, so he wrote this, and sort of the most famous first version was Bing Crosby with the Andrews Sisters in 1950. He recorded and released that. But it's in a kind of difficult key for guitar. It's not super easy. In kind of a difficult key for ukulele too, not super easy. But again, you know, I mean, not impossible. It's certainly doable. But then also, after the first verse, there's a key change, and it goes up a half step. So now, all of a sudden, it's all completely different chords. And there's lots of sort of complex chords in it. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is like a, you know, a big, huge undertaking. So then I thought, well, you know, I could probably simplify it a bit. So I simplified it a bit, made it a little less tricky to play. And actually, it ended up being quite easy to play. So that's really cool. And that's, you know, a nice thing about a good song. It doesn't have to rely on the complexities of, you know, the harmonies and the arrangement and everything. It could be stripped down to just some basic chords, and it's still a really good song. Doesn't need all the embellishments, all the extras. So that's a little bit of background info. Like I said, I jotted down notes. Okay, so we have a few chords. So D minor, okay, I'm going to start with the thickest string. So you don't play that, you don't play the A string. The D is open, the G is at the 2nd fret, the B is at the 3rd fret, and the high E is at the 1st fret. So that's a D minor chord. Then we have a G7 chord, okay, which from thickest to thinnest string is 3, 2, 0, 0, 0, 1. Okay, that's a G7. Then we have a C chord, which you don't play the low E. Then the A string is 3rd fret, 2nd fret, open, 1st fret, and open. Is a C. Then we have a C7. Really easy. Just play the C chord, and then your pinky should be kind of floating around if you're using your 1st, 2nd, 3rd fingers. Your pinky, you're going to press down at the 3rd fret on the G. And that's a C7. And then we have an F. And technically, a full F is all 6 strings, or yeah, a full F is all 6 strings. And it's a bar chord at the 1st fret. So it ends up being 1, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1. Okay, but you can shorten it, as a lot of people do, and all you do is just take that chord, 1, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, and drop out some of the strings. So sort of the easiest, simplest, I think, would be the top 3 strings, the 3 thinnest strings, 2nd fret on the G, 1st fret on the B, 1st fret on the E. So that would be the simplest F. Then you could add, if you can, the 3rd fret on the D string, and that's a F that most people play. I kind of usually like to play the middle 4 strings, so you end up with 3, you don't play the low E string. You don't play either E string. So you end up with, on the A string, 3rd fret, D string, 3rd fret, G, 2nd fret, and B, 1st fret. So that ends up being a nice kind of compromise, for me at least. So that's an F. Then we have an A7, which is, you don't play the low E, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0. Pretty simple. And then we have a D7, which you don't play the E or the A strings, the low E or the A strings. Then, starting on the D string, it's 0, 2, 1, 2 is a D7. And that's it. And I'll have them all written in the description below. But anyway, so since I sort of changed, well, I definitely changed the key from the Bing Crosby version and didn't do the key change. So I've kind of, rearranged some things. And there's so many different versions that, like, whatever. So our version is in the key of C. Okay, C major. And that makes the chords a lot easier to play. So for the intro, I have D minor, G7, C, and then C again. So, oh, and that brings me to, I'm thinking just off the top of my head, I didn't Google a metronome or anything. If we're doing like 90 beats per minute, then each chord would be like 2 beats. Okay, so the intro would be 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So that's D minor, G7, and C, and then C again. So you could do that to start, That gives you a little bit of time between chords to switch, okay? But then, to kind of make it sound more like the song, if you do 4 beats for each chord and double the metronome timing, so it would be 180 beats per minute, and then 4 beats for each chord, you'd end up with something around there. I don't know exactly if I'm playing 180 beats per minute, but something around there. And then, of course, once you get the hang of it, you can throw in some down and up strumming, whatever sort of sounds right to you. That sort of has the feel that I'm looking for with the strumming. But you can play around with it. The important thing right now is that we're getting the chords in the right places and the right timing. So that would be an intro, okay? Then the rest of the song is just verse after verse after verse. And even the vocals are virtually the same lyrics. There's like slight changes, like, what is it, like, to say Merry Christmas, to say Merry Christmas to you. Actually, what is it? To say Merry Christmas to you. So to say Merry Christmas to you, or to wish a Merry Christmas to you, or a very Merry Christmas to you. There's slight variations, but it's virtually the same verse. And the music is exactly the same. So anyway, let's get into it. So the verse is, and this will all be written underneath too, is C, 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 C. So that's the first line of the chords. I'm doing them in groups of 4. Okay. Then C again, then G7, and that's the second line. Then the third line is G7 all the way across. So G7, 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 G7. Then the fourth line is G7, G7, C. Okay, so that's the first half. Okay, nice and easy. You know, most songs are kind of lumped into groups of like 4s, with 2s being sometimes used and 8s being sometimes used. But, you know, really, if you think of it in groups of 4, 8 is just 2 4s, and 2 is just half of a group of 4. So really, I like to think of things in groups of 4. So if we look at this, the verse, the first half of the verse is 4 lines with 4 chords per line. Okay, and I'm counting a C, a C, a C, a C, repeated as 4 chords, 4 measures, whatever. And each of the chords, if we're doing the 180, 4 beats. So, you know, 4 lines, 4 chords per line, 4 beats per chord. You know, it really comes out to bunches of 4s. So the second half of the verse is, again, 4 lines, 4 chords per line, and 4 beats per chord. So the second half is now the C7, 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 F, twice, A7, A7, D7, G7, then C, C, C7, A7, D minor, G7, C, G. Did I do a G? I didn't do a G. G is 3, 2, 0, 0, 3, 3. Is how I usually play it. Some people play it 3, 2, 0, 0, 0, 3. Either way, it doesn't matter. You almost can't hear the difference. So that's the G. Okay, that is the verse. Simple, right? Okay, so let's play along. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. C, 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 G7, 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 C, C, C7, C7, F, F, A7, A7, D7, G7, C, C, C7, A7, D minor, G7, C, G. Woo! I got through it without making a mistake. Well, without making a huge mistake. So anyway, so that's the verse. Okay, and then a nice way to do this. I've seen a bunch of different versions. If you look on YouTube, there's plenty of versions of this song. So a nice arrangement sort of that I came up with is the intro, okay, then the first verse, then the second verse, then there's a little instrumental section, okay, and that's actually just the first half of the verse. So the first 4 lines of the verse. Then the bridge section is just the bottom 4, the second half of the verse with vocals. So the first half of the verse is just instrumental, just, you know, play the chords, C's in G7s. Is that whole section, is a little instrumental section. And then the bridge is just the second half of the verse with the vocals. And then do a third verse, which again is just the verse, with a little repeated bit at the end. So the last line of my little version, instead of you know, to say Merry Christmas to you, instead of that, so that instead of the D minor, the G7, the C, and the G, okay, you want to do D minor, G7, D minor, G7, D minor, G7, C, and then C. Okay, so then we end up with, you know, the to say Merry Christmas, to say Merry Christmas, a very Merry Christmas, to say Merry Christmas, and boom, done. So that's a nice little sort of repeated little tag thing at the end that signifies something different, that we're now at the end of the song. So there you go. Pretty simple, pretty easy.